All right, let's talk about a movie that has this really bizarre legacy. I mean, depending on who you ask, it's either one of the worst things ever made or it's a legit masterpiece. You know the one I'm talking about, the 2002 Nickelodeon sci-fi flick, Clockstoppers. So today we're going to get to the bottom of it. Why is this movie so loved and so hated at the same time? To really get this story, you first have to understand just how viciously critics went after this movie when it came out. And honestly, this quote, it kind of says it all. They were not pulling any punches. Watching grass grow. Ouch. So to really appreciate the movie's weird second life, we have to start with its first one. And that story begins with it being a massive critical failure. Okay, before we get into the reviews, quick primer so we're all on the same page. The movie's big sci-fi idea is called hypertime. You click a watch, your molecules go super, super fast, and to you, it looks like the whole world has frozen still. So you're not actually stopping time, you're just speeding yourself up. Make sense? Okay, cool. And man, the numbers, they do not lie. A 40 on Metacritic, which is just barely hanging on to mixed, and a truly rotten 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, by any professional yardstick you want to use, this movie was considered a total bomb. So, what was the problem? Well, the critics all kind of zeroed in on the same things. They called the plot stupid, just riddled with holes, the acting wooden. One review literally said the main character had the charisma of a wet mop. They said the whole concept was unoriginal, the science behind hypertime was a total mess, and that the whole thing was, and this phrase came up again and again, a cinematic time waster. And this line from Entertainment Weekly, the irony is just too good, isn't it? A movie all about speeding up time apparently felt like it was slowing it down to an agonizing crawl for the critics. That's gotta sting. But here, this is where the whole story just takes a wild turn. Because for every one of those scathing reviews, there's a whole generation of people who saw this movie as kids and thought it was the coolest thing they had ever seen. Which leads to one very, very big question. So now we get to chapter 2 of this story. We're leaving the critics behind and entering the strange second life of Clockstoppers, not as a failure, but as this totally beloved generational classic. Just look at this. Look at the gap. The critics on Metacritic gave it a 40. The audience? A 69. Now that's not just a little disagreement, right? That's two completely different realities. It's like they watched two different movies. This is the mystery we're here to solve. And this quote from a user on Reddit, it just perfectly explains why. For an 11-year-old kid back in 2002, none of the things the critics cared about mattered. Not one bit. The concept was just so cool, it was pure wish fulfillment. It blew their minds. And you know, it goes even deeper than just thinking it was a cool movie. For so many people, this film is all tangled up in these powerful childhood memories. It's about that specific time in their lives, that uncomplicated feeling of pure fun. It forged this real, lasting connection. So we're left with these two completely opposite experiences of the exact same movie. How is that even possible? All right, let's actually deconstruct this thing and figure out why this massive divide exists. It really, really all just comes down to perspective. A critic watches and sees plot holes and inconsistent science. A kid watches and sees a cool power that makes perfect sense for pulling pranks. A critic sees dated special effects that look like an old music video. A kid sees these mind-blowing visuals of a frozen world. And the soundtrack? What an adult critic heard as a relentless assault of pop punk, a kid just heard, well, Blink-182 and Smash Mouth. It was awesome. It's the exact same story with the cast. Critics saw a lead actor with, again, the charisma of a wet mop. But the kids watching? They saw the cute guy from Bring It On. Critics saw a love interest who was just kind of there. The audience saw, and I'm quoting here, a goddess, my dream girl. And the villain? Critics thought he was a boring, generic bad guy. The kids? They recognized him as the absolute legend Kyle Reese from The Terminator. Okay, so what happens when you smash these two completely different viewpoints together? You finally get to the truth. The real value of Clockstoppers isn't as a great film, but as something else. It's a perfect, hermetically sealed time capsule of the year 2002. It's got that unmistakable Nickelodeon movies vibe. The soundtrack is just dripping with that pop-punk energy. It's a fantasy about technology that could only exist right before smartphones took over everything.
I mean, every single frame of this movie is just a concentrated shot of pure Y2K nostalgia.
And hey, here's the proof that it worked, at least for the people it was made for. Despite those horrible reviews, the movie actually turned a profit. It cost $26 million to make and brought in almost $39 million. So yeah, the kids who wanted to see it went and saw it. The critics just didn't matter.
So here it is, the whole thing in a nutshell. The reason for the big divide is that critics were judging Clockstoppers as a piece of timeless art, and by that standard, yeah, it fails. But its audience wasn't looking for a timeless classic. They were experiencing a movie that was perfect for their time, a movie that became a core memory. Its value isn't as cinema, it's as a cultural artifact. It's a time capsule. And that kind of leaves us with one last question for you to think about. We all have one, right? That movie the critics tore to shreds that most people have totally forgotten, but for you, it's just a perfect, cherished little time capsule of a moment in your life. So, what's yours?